When 19-year-old Clara becomes the last sister left at Whitmore's home for young ladies, a place where orphan girls are sold to the highest bidder, she faces a grim winter on the streets after 3 families have already returned her for being too difficult. But when a mysterious widowed rancher arrives seeking not a quiet, obedient servant, but someone strong enough to reach his heartbroken 8-year-old daughter who hasn't spoken since her mother's death, Clara must decide if she's willing to risk her heart one more time. Will this damaged family become her salvation, or will Clara's fierce spirit doom them all to another devastating goodbye? The knife fell from Clara's hand and clattered onto the kitchen floor. She stared at the blood on her finger where the blade had cut deep while she peeled potatoes in the dark. Outside, the town bell rang 5 times. Dawn was still an hour away, but Mrs. Whitmore always made the girls start cooking before sunrise. Clara sucked the blood from her cut and picked up the knife again. Her hands shook from cold and fear. Today was different. She could feel it in the way Mrs. Whitmore had looked at her last night, like someone deciding whether to keep a broken dish or throw it away. At 19, Clara was the oldest girl left at Whitmore's home for young ladies. The name sounded fancy, but everyone in Millbrook, Pennsylvania knew what it really was. A place where girls with no families waited to be married off to whoever could pay Mrs. Whitmore's price. Her 5 sisters had all been placed over the past 3 years. That's what Mrs. Whitmore called it when she sold girls to men who needed wives or servants. Mary went first, married to a farmer twice her age. Then Beth, sent to cook for a family of 7 boys. Sarah became a shopkeeper's wife. Lizzie went to care for an old man's sick mother. Finally, little Anna, sweet Anna, who was only 16, was given to a lumber camp cook who needed help feeding hungry workers. None of them ever wrote letters. Girls like them weren't taught to read or write much. Clara was the last one left in the tiny attic room that once held 6 beds. Now 5 beds sat empty, their thin mattresses bare and cold. She talked to herself sometimes, just to hear a voice that wasn't Mrs. Whitmore's sharp commands. The cut on her finger bled onto the potato she was peeling. Clara wiped it clean and kept working. Mrs. Whitmore got angry when food was wasted, and Clara couldn't afford to make her angrier than she already was. 3 men had tried to place Clara over the past year. The first one, Mr. Jenkins, brought her back after 2 weeks. He said she asked too many questions and didn't know her place. The second, Mr. Cole, returned her after just 5 days. He claimed she was too stubborn and wouldn't listen to his wife's orders. The third, Mr. Peterson, didn't even keep her a full day. He said she had wild ideas about women having opinions. Each time Clara was returned, Mrs. Whitmore's face got harder. The woman's gray hair was always pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her skin. Her pale blue eyes looked at Clara like she was a problem that needed solving. Troublesome girls end up on the streets, Mrs. Whitmore had said last week. Winter's coming, Clara. Streets are no place for a girl with no money and no family. Clara knew what that meant. Mrs. Whitmore was running out of patience. If nobody would take Clara soon, she'd be thrown out with nothing. Girls who got thrown out usually didn't survive their first winter alone. Heavy footsteps walked across the floor above the kitchen. Someone was in Mrs. Whitmore's office. Clara had heard them arrive before dawn. A man's voice she didn't recognize, speaking in low tones with Mrs. Whitmore. They were talking about her. She was sure of it. The potato in Clara's hand was peeled down to almost nothing. She'd been thinking too hard and cutting away too much. She dropped it into the pot of water and reached for another one. Her stomach growled with hunger. The girls ate breakfast after everyone else was fed, Mrs. Whitmore, her grown son who helped run the home, and any visitors who might be staying. Sometimes there wasn't much left for the girls. Clara remembered when her real family had enough food. Before the fever took her parents and baby brother when she was 14. Before the bank took their farm because her father owed money. Before she ended up here with her sisters, all of them orphans with nowhere else to go. She used to dream about her sisters coming back for her. Mary would walk through the door with her farmer husband and say, "We've come to take Clara home." Or Beth would arrive with the family she cooked for and announce, "Clara's going to live with us now." But years passed and nobody came. Clara stopped dreaming about rescue and started thinking about escape instead. But where could a girl go with no money, no skills except cooking and cleaning, and winter coming fast? The footsteps upstairs moved toward the staircase. Clara's heart began to beat faster. Soon, Mrs. Whitmore would call her upstairs to meet whoever had come to look at her. She would stand in the parlor like a horse at market while the man decided if she was worth his money. Clara set down the knife and wiped her hands on her apron. The cut on her finger had stopped bleeding, but it still hurt. Everything hurt these days. Her back ached from sleeping on a thin mattress. Her hands were rough and cracked from washing clothes in cold water. Her heart hurt from missing her sisters and wondering if she'd ever see them again. But Clara wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. She had survived 5 years in this place. She had survived being returned by 3 different men who couldn't break her spirit. She had survived watching all her sisters disappear one by one. Maybe she could survive whatever came next. The floorboards above creaked as the footsteps moved again. A man's laugh echoed down through the ceiling. Not mean or cruel, but warm somehow. Clara had never heard a laugh like that in Mrs. Whitmore's house. She picked up another potato and started peeling it carefully. Her hands were steady now. Whatever happened next, she would face it with her chin up and her voice ready. She was Clara Henley, and she might not have much, but she had herself. That would have to be enough. The kitchen door swung open behind her. "Clara!" Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut through the early morning quiet like a saw through wood. "Leave that work and come upstairs. Now." Clara set down the knife one more time. She smoothed her brown hair back from her face and straightened her shoulders. Then she turned around and walked toward whatever waited for her upstairs. She had no idea her whole life was about to change. "You can sit down, Mr. Morrison." Clara froze at the top of the stairs. A man's voice came from the parlor below, but it wasn't giving orders like most men did. He was asking Mrs. Whitmore to sit. Nobody ever told Mrs. Whitmore what to do in her own house. "I prefer to stand during business meetings," Mrs. Whitmore replied, her voice sharp as broken glass. "This won't take long." Clara crept down 3 more steps, trying to see into the parlor without being seen. Through the doorway, she caught sight of a tall man with dark hair that had silver streaks running through it. He wore clean work clothes, not fancy like a rich man, but not patched and worn like a poor one either. "Actually, it might take longer than you think," the man said. His voice was calm but firm. "I have questions about the girl." Clara's heart jumped. They were talking about her just like she'd thought. But this man, he called her the girl instead of it or that one like some visitors did. Small difference, but Clara noticed. "Clara Henley is 19 years old, healthy, and capable of all household duties," Mrs. Whitmore said in the voice she used for selling things. "She can cook, clean, wash, mend, and tend gardens. She's strong enough for farm work if needed." What about her education? The question surprised Clara. Most men who came here didn't care if girls could read or write. "She knows her letters and numbers well enough," Mrs. Whitmore said quickly. "More education than that makes girls think too highly of themselves." Clara almost snorted. She could read simple words and write her own name, but that was about all. Mrs. Whitmore made sure the girls didn't get too much learning. "And her character?" the man asked. Mrs. Whitmore's pause lasted too long. Clara held her breath. "Clara has had some difficulty with previous placements," Mrs. Whitmore finally admitted. "She can be headstrong." "Headstrong how?" "She asks questions when she should stay quiet. She argues when she should obey. She thinks her opinions matter." Clara winced. When Mrs. Whitmore put it like that, it sounded awful. But Clara couldn't help wondering about things. Why did some people have so much while others had nothing? Why were girls expected to never speak their minds? Why did men get to make all the choices? "I see," the man said, but he didn't sound upset. "What kind of questions does she ask?" "Questions that aren't her business to ask," Mrs. Whitmore snapped. Mr. Morrison, I should warn you that 3 different families have returned Clara to me. If you're looking for a quiet, obedient girl who won't cause trouble, you might want to consider someone else. Clara's face burned with shame. Mrs. Whitmore was trying to get rid of her by telling this Mr. Morrison all her worst qualities first. But why? Usually Mrs. Whitmore tried to make the girl sound perfect until after the money changed hands. What if I'm not looking for quiet and obedient? Mr. Morrison asked. Both Clara and Mrs. Whitmore went silent. Clara had never heard a man say anything like that before. I beg your pardon? Mrs. Whitmore's voice sounded strangled. What if I need someone who asks questions and thinks for herself? Mr. Morrison continued. What if I need someone strong enough to stand up for what's right? Clara leaned forward so far she almost fell down the stairs. This conversation was nothing like what she'd expected. Mr. Morrison, Mrs. Whitmore said slowly, perhaps you should tell me exactly what kind of help you need. My daughter needs someone who won't give up on her, Mr. Morrison said simply. Someone who'll fight for her even when things get difficult. Daughter? Clara's mind raced. Most men who came here wanted wives or servants. This man had a daughter who needed help. What kind of help? How old is your daughter? Mrs. Whitmore asked. 8. Her name is Emma. And her mother? Died 6 months ago. Mr. Morrison's voice got quieter. Emma hasn't spoken since the funeral. Clara's heart squeezed tight. A little girl, only 8 years old, who'd lost her mother and stopped talking. Clara knew what it felt like to lose everyone you loved. She'd been 14 when her parents died, but she remembered the terrible silence that came after, when the world kept moving but you felt frozen in place. I've hired 3 housekeepers since my wife passed, Mr. Morrison continued. They all said Emma was too difficult. One said she was being stubborn on purpose. Another said she was simple-minded. The third said I should send her to an asylum for children who can't be helped. Clara's hands curled into fists. How dare those women say such things about a little girl who was just sad and scared? What makes you think Clara could do better? Mrs. Whitmore asked. Because she's been through hard times and didn't let them break her spirit, Mr. Morrison said. Because she asks questions instead of just accepting that bad things can't be changed. Because 3 families returned her for being too strong, and strength is exactly what Emma needs to see. Clara couldn't believe what she was hearing. This man, this stranger, understood something about her that she'd barely understood about herself. He saw her refusal to stay quiet as strength instead of stubbornness. Clara! Mrs. Whitmore's voice cracked like a whip. Stop lurking on the stairs and come down here this instant. Clara jumped. She'd been so focused on listening that she'd forgotten to stay hidden. Her face burning red, she walked down the remaining steps and into the parlor. The first thing she noticed about Mr. Morrison was his eyes. They were gray like storm clouds, but warm somehow. When he looked at her, she didn't feel like he was trying to decide how much she was worth. He looked at her like she was a person who mattered. Miss Henley, he said, standing up when she entered the room. Clara stared. Men didn't stand up for girls from Mrs. Whitmore's house. They barely looked at them as people. Mr. Morrison, she said carefully. I suppose you heard most of our conversation, he said, and Clara was surprised to see a small smile on his face. He wasn't angry that she'd been listening. Yes, sir. I'm sorry for eavesdropping. Don't apologize for wanting to know what people are saying about your future, he said. That's exactly the kind of thinking my daughter needs to learn. Mrs. Whitmore made a disapproving noise, but Mr. Morrison ignored her. Tell me, Miss Henley, he continued, what do you think about taking care of a child who might not speak to you for weeks or months? A child who might seem like she doesn't want your help. Clara thought about little Emma, 8 years old and silent with grief. She thought about herself at 14, angry and lost after her parents died. She thought about all the times she'd wanted someone to understand that being difficult didn't mean being broken. I think, Clara said slowly, that sometimes when people stop talking, it's because nobody's been listening to the right things. Mr. Morrison's smile grew wider. And what would you listen for? The things she's not saying with words, Clara answered. The things she's trying to say with everything else. For a long moment, the parlor was completely quiet. Then Mr. Morrison nodded. Miss Henley, he said, would you be willing to come home with me and meet Emma? The floorboards screamed as Samuel Morrison stepped forward, and Clara's heart nearly stopped when she saw what he carried. A small wooden horse, painted bright red with a golden mane. This belonged to my daughter, he said, holding the toy carefully like it might break. Emma carved it herself last Christmas, before her mother got sick. Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat loudly. Mr. Morrison, we were discussing Clara's placement. We're discussing Emma's future. Samuel cut her off, his voice firm but not angry. He looked straight at Clara. Miss Henley, I need to tell you something important. Emma hasn't just stopped talking. She's stopped playing, stopped eating much, stopped being a little girl. Clara stared at the wooden horse. Its paint was chipped from being held so many times. Where is she now? Hiding under the kitchen table. She does that when strangers come. Samuel's big hands turned the toy over slowly. She's been listening to everything we've said through the floor. These old houses carry sound like water through pipes. A chill ran down Clara's back. The little girl had heard them talking about her like she was a problem to solve. What did the other housekeepers do wrong? Samuel sat down heavily, making his chair creak. The first one, Mrs. Patterson, tried to force Emma to talk by not giving her food until she asked for it. Emma didn't eat for 2 days. Clara's hands made fists. That's cruel. The second one, Miss Jenkins, decided Emma was being stubborn on purpose. She made her stand in the corner for hours, saying she couldn't move until she spoke. Samuel's jaw got tight. I came home to find Emma had wet herself rather than break her silence to ask for the outhouse. Mrs. Whitmore shifted in her chair. Perhaps the child simply needs firm guidance. The third one, Samuel continued, ignoring her. Mrs. Caldwell told Emma that good little girls who love their papas don't make them worry by staying quiet. She said Emma was being selfish and hurting me on purpose. Clara felt sick. What happened then? Emma hid in the barn loft for 6 hours. I found her there after dark, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Samuel looked down at the wooden horse. That's when I decided no more housekeepers. I'd rather do everything myself than watch strangers hurt my daughter. Then why did you come here today? Clara asked. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Because last week, Emma did something that scared me more than her silence ever has. The room went very still. Even Mrs. Whitmore stopped fidgeting with her papers. She gave me this horse, Samuel said, lifting the toy. She put it in my hands and looked at me like she was saying goodbye. Then she went to her room and wouldn't come out for 2 days. She only ate when I left food outside her door. Clara's heart started beating faster. What do you think she meant? I think she's giving up. I think she believes she's too much trouble, that everyone would be happier if she just disappeared. Samuel's voice cracked a little. I can't lose her too, Miss Henley. She's all I have left of her mother, all I have left of the family we built together. Mrs. Whitmore stood up suddenly. This is highly irregular. Clara is here to discuss her own future, not to hear about your family troubles. But Clara wasn't listening to Mrs. Whitmore anymore. She was thinking about Emma, 8 years old and hiding under a kitchen table, believing she was too broken to deserve love. Clara knew that feeling. She'd lived with it every day at the boarding house. Mr. Morrison, Clara said slowly, why do you think I might be different from the others? Samuel looked up at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Hope mixed with desperation, like a drowning man reaching for a rope. Because you understand what it feels like to be called difficult, he said quietly. You know what it's like when people give up on you before they really try to understand you. Emma needs someone who won't see her silence as something to fix, but as something to respect while she finds her way back to the world. Clara thought about this. What if she never talks again? Then she doesn't, Samuel said firmly. But she needs to know she's loved whether she speaks or not. She needs to feel safe again. She needs to remember that being quiet doesn't make her broken. Mrs. Whitmore made a huffing sound. This is absurd. Clara has no experience with children, especially difficult ones. She can barely manage herself. I was a difficult child once, Clara said, her voice getting stronger. I know what it feels like when adults talk about you like you're not in the room. I know what it's like to believe you're nothing but trouble. Samuel leaned forward. And what helped you? Clara thought hard. Nothing helped, really. I just got angry enough to keep fighting. But Emma's different. She's not angry. She's scared and sad and tired. Clara paused. Maybe what she needs isn't someone to make her better. Maybe she needs someone to sit with her while she's broken and show her that broken doesn't mean worthless. The room went quiet. Samuel stared at Clara like she'd just said something amazing. Mrs. Whitmore looked confused and irritated. You'd be willing to try? Samuel asked. Even knowing she might never speak again? Even knowing it might take months or years for her to trust anyone? Clara thought about Emma hiding under the table, listening to adults decide her fate. She thought about the wooden horse, given away like a goodbye. She thought about all the times she'd wanted someone to see past her anger to the scared girl underneath. I'd be willing, Clara said. But I have conditions. Mrs. Whitmore gasped. Clara, you are hardly in a position to make demands. But Samuel nodded. What conditions? I want to meet Emma before I decide anything. I want to talk to her even if she doesn't talk back. I want to understand what she needs instead of guessing. Clara took a deep breath. And I want your promise that if I say she needs something different than what you think she needs, you'll listen to me. Samuel was quiet for a long time. Then he smiled, and it changed his whole face. Miss Henley, I think you might be exactly what Emma has been waiting for. From somewhere below them came a small sound, like a chair scraping against the floor. Emma was moving around in the kitchen, probably trying to hear better. There's one more thing, Samuel said, lowering his voice. Emma's been having nightmares. Bad ones. She wakes up screaming but won't tell me what they're about. The doctor says it's normal for children who've lost a parent, but... He shrugged helplessly. I don't know how to help her with something she won't talk about. Clara nodded. I used to have nightmares too. Still do sometimes. Maybe that's something we can figure out together. Mrs. Whitmore finally spoke up, her voice sharp with annoyance. This is all very touching, but we still haven't discussed the practical matters. Clara needs proper placement, with references and a contract. I'll pay double what you usually receive for placements, Samuel said calmly. And I'll provide Clara with her own room, her own horse to ride to town, and enough wages to save money for her future if she ever decides to leave. Clara's eyes went wide. Her own room? Her own horse? Money to save? She'd never imagined such things. Furthermore, Samuel continued, this isn't a typical servant arrangement. Clara would be part of our family. She'd eat meals with us, join us for church on Sundays, have a voice in household decisions. He looked directly at Clara. I'm not looking for someone to serve us, Miss Henley. I'm looking for someone to help us heal. Mrs. Whitmore's mouth fell open. This was more than she'd ever arranged for any of her girls. Clara felt dizzy with possibility and fear. It sounded too good to be true. What's the catch? Samuel's smile was sad but honest. The catch is that Emma might never get better. The catch is that some days will be harder than others. The catch is that healing isn't quick or easy or certain. He paused. And the catch is that if you leave after Emma starts to trust you, it might break her completely. Clara understood. This wasn't just about a job or a place to live. This was about becoming part of a family that was barely holding together. It was about taking responsibility for a little girl's heart. I need to think about it, Clara said. Of course. Samuel stood up. But would you be willing to meet Emma first? Just to see if you think it might work? Clara looked at Mrs. Whitmore. who was red-faced with frustration but couldn't argue with such a generous offer. Then she looked back at Samuel, this man who loved his daughter enough to trust a stranger with her healing. "Yes," Clara said. "I'd like to meet Emma very much." As they prepared to leave Mrs. Whitmore's parlor, Clara heard it again, that soft scraping sound from below. Emma was still listening, still waiting to learn what would happen to her next. Clara hoped she was ready to help write a better ending to this little girl's story than anyone had ever written for her own. A scream tore through the farmhouse at midnight, sharp enough to shatter glass. Clara bolted upright in her narrow bed, heart hammering as the sound echoed through the walls. Another scream followed, high and desperate, coming from Emma's room across the hall. Clara's bare feet hit the cold wooden floor before she was fully awake. She found Samuel already there, sitting on Emma's bed in his nightshirt, trying to calm his daughter. Emma thrashed against her covers, eyes squeezed shut, crying out words that made no sense but carried all the terror in the world. "Mama, don't go in the ground. Mama, wake up. The dirt's too heavy." Clara's heart broke watching the little girl fight invisible demons. This was the fourth nightmare this week, each one worse than the last. Samuel looked exhausted, helpless, like a man trying to fight an enemy he couldn't see. "Emma, sweetheart, you're safe," Samuel whispered, but his daughter couldn't hear him through her terror. Clara moved closer. "May I try something?" Samuel nodded, desperate enough to let anyone help. Clara climbed onto the bed and lay down next to Emma, not touching her but close enough that the little girl could feel her warmth. Then she began to sing very softly, an old song her own mother had sung before the fever took her. "Hush now, little sparrow. Fold your weary wings. Morning light is coming with the hope that daybreak brings." Emma's thrashing slowed. Her eyes opened, confused and frightened, but she was awake now. "The dirt won't hurt your mama," Clara whispered. "She's not really in the ground, you know. The part that made her your mama, the part that loved you, that's still here." Clara touched her own chest gently. "It lives in here now, in your heart, where nothing can hurt it." Emma stared at Clara with those big dark eyes, tears still wet on her cheeks. "Can you feel it?" Clara asked. "That warm spot inside that lights up when you think about how much she loved you?" Emma's hand moved slowly to her chest. She pressed her palm against her nightgown and nodded just barely. "That's her," Clara said. "That's the part that matters. The ground can't touch that part. Nothing can." For the first time since Clara had arrived, Emma spoke. Not words, but a soft hum that matched Clara's lullaby. It was barely audible, like wind through grass, but it was Emma's voice. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. Clara kept singing until Emma fell back asleep, this time peaceful and still. When she tried to get up, Samuel caught her arm. "Thank you," he whispered. "I've been trying to help her with those nightmares for months. Nothing worked." Clara smoothed Emma's hair away from her face. "Sometimes you can't fight the sadness away. Sometimes you just have to sit with it until it gets tired." The next morning brought their first real test as a family. Clara woke to find Emma standing by her bed, still in her nightgown, holding a piece of paper. "What's this, sweetheart?" Clara asked, sitting up. Emma handed her the paper without speaking. It was covered in careful drawings, stick figures that were clearly meant to be the three of them, standing in front of the farmhouse. But in the corner was another figure, lying down with X's for eyes. Clara's throat got tight. "Is this your mama?" Emma nodded. "Are you worried that if you're happy with me and your papa, it means you're forgetting her?" Another nod, this one accompanied by fresh tears. Clara pulled Emma onto her lap. "Oh, honey, listen to me very carefully. Your heart isn't like a cup that gets full and has no room for more love. It's like a garden. The more love you plant in it, the bigger it grows. Loving me and your papa doesn't take any love away from your mama. It just makes your garden bigger." Emma leaned against Clara's shoulder, and Clara felt some of the tension leave the little girl's body. "Besides, Clara added softly. I think your mama would want you to be happy. Don't you think she'd like knowing you have people to take care of you? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she pointed to the drawing, specifically to the stick figure that represented Clara. What about me? Clara asked. Emma touched Clara's face gently, then pointed to her own chest, the same spot where she'd felt her mama's love the night before. Clara understood. Emma was asking if Clara would stay in her heart too, if Clara would become part of that warm, safe place where love lived. Forever and always, Clara promised. Even if I'm old and gray and can't remember my own name, I'll still be right here. She touched Emma's chest gently. Right in your heart garden, keeping your mama company. Emma smiled then, the first real smile Clara had seen from her. It transformed her whole face, making her look like the bright, curious child her father remembered. But their peaceful moment was interrupted by voices outside, loud, angry voices that made Emma go rigid with fear. Clara looked out the window and saw 3 men on horseback in the yard. Samuel was talking to them, but his stance was tense, defensive. One of the men was pointing at the house, gesturing angrily. Stay here, Clara told Emma, but the little girl grabbed her arm. Emma's eyes were wide with the same terror Clara had seen during the nightmares. She pointed toward the window, then pressed both hands to her mouth, shaking her head frantically. Clara understood. Emma had seen men like this before. Men who came to take things away, to break up families. The little girl was afraid they were here for Clara. I'm not going anywhere, Clara said firmly, but I need to find out what they want. She dressed quickly and went downstairs, Emma following close behind like a shadow. They crept to the kitchen window where they could see and hear everything. Told you before, Morrison, that girl doesn't belong here, one of the men was saying. He was big and rough-looking, with a beard that needed trimming. She's supposed to be working for the Hartwell family. Samuel stood his ground. Clara is exactly where she belongs. She's helping care for my daughter. That's not what we heard, said another man, this one skinny with mean eyes. We heard she's putting on airs, acting like she's too good for honest work. The Hartwells are good Christian folk who offered her a proper position. Clara's blood went cold. She recognized the skinny man now. He worked for Thomas Hartwell, the man who'd wanted to cure her of speaking her mind. Furthermore, the first man continued, there's talk in town about this arrangement. A young unmarried woman living in a house with a widowed man. It's not proper. It's causing scandal. Samuel's jaw tightened. There's nothing improper about this arrangement. Clara is an employee, nothing more. But Clara could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. She'd seen that look before, the moment when someone started to wonder if she was worth the trouble she caused. Emma tugged on Clara's skirt, pointing toward the back door. The little girl wanted them to run, to hide, to disappear before the men could take Clara away. But Clara had spent too many years running and hiding. She'd promised Emma she would stay, and she meant to keep that promise. She opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, Emma right behind her. Gentlemen, Clara said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I understand you want to speak with me. The men turned, surprised by her boldness. The big one with the beard looked her up and down like she was livestock at market. You're the Henley girl? The one causing all this trouble. I'm Clara Henley, she said simply. And the only trouble I've caused is helping a little girl with nightmares and learning to make decent biscuits. The skinny man sneered. Don't get smart with us, girl. You've got responsibilities. The Hartwells offered you good work, and you ran off like some kind of princess too good for honest labor. I didn't run off, Clara replied. I chose something better. This made all 3 men angry. The idea that a girl from the boarding house could choose anything, could turn down what they considered generous charity, clearly offended them. You don't get to choose, the bearded man said harshly. Girls like you take what you're offered and are grateful for it. That's when Emma did something that surprised everyone. She stepped out from behind Clara, looked straight at the angry men, and spoke in a voice clear as a bell. She's not going anywhere. She's ours now. The silence that followed was complete. Samuel stared at his daughter in amazement. The three men looked confused and slightly embarrassed. Nobody wanted to argue with an 8-year-old girl. But Emma wasn't finished. She took Clara's hand and looked up at her with absolute trust. "Tell them you're staying," Emma said softly. "Tell them you promised." Clara looked at this brave little girl who'd found her voice to defend someone she loved. She looked at Samuel, who was watching her with hope and fear mixed together in his eyes. She looked at the three men who represented everything she'd run from, the belief that she had no value except what others decided to give her. "I promised," Clara said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And I keep my promises." The bearded man's face went red. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" "Actually, I can," Clara interrupted. "I'm 19 years old. I can work for whoever I choose, live wherever I choose, and make my own decisions about my life." She was stretching the truth a little. Legally, Mrs. Whitmore still had some claim over her, but Clara was betting these men didn't know the exact laws about orphan girls. Samuel stepped closer, his presence solid and reassuring behind her. "You heard Miss Henley. She's made her choice. I suggest you respect it." The three men looked uncertain now. They'd expected to intimidate a scared girl and a grieving widower. They hadn't expected to face a united front. "The Hartwells won't like this," the skinny man muttered. "The Hartwells will have to find someone else," Clara said firmly. "Someone who actually wants to work for them." After more grumbling and threats that sounded increasingly empty, the three men finally rode away. Clara watched them go, her hands shaking slightly now that the confrontation was over. Emma hugged Clara around the waist. "You stayed," she whispered. "I told you I would," Clara replied, hugging her back. Samuel joined them on the porch, looking proud and worried at the same time. "That was brave, Clara, but it might not be over. The Hartwells have influence in town." Clara nodded. "I know, but running away never solved anything. Besides," she looked down at Emma, who was still clinging to her, "I've got something worth fighting for now." As they went back inside, Clara realized the real test wasn't the nightmares or the angry men or even the gossip in town. The real test was whether she could learn to believe she deserved the love this little family was offering her. The horses came at dawn, their hooves making angry sounds on the frozen ground. Clara dropped the milk pail when she saw the black wagon rolling up the dirt path. Milk splashed white against her boots, but she couldn't move. She knew that wagon. She knew the woman sitting straight as a board on the driver's seat. Mrs. Whitmore had found her. "Emma," Clara called, her voice shaking. "Emma, come inside right now." The little girl looked up from where she was feeding corn to the chickens. Her face went white when she saw the wagon. She ran to Clara and grabbed her hand tight. "Who are they?" Emma whispered. "People from my old life," Clara said. "People who think they own me." Samuel came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He took one look at the wagon and his face turned hard as stone. He walked over to Clara and Emma, putting himself between them and the visitors. Mrs. Whitmore climbed down from the wagon like a queen stepping off her throne. She wore her best black dress and her meanest face. Behind her came a man Clara remembered too well, Thomas Hartwell, thin as a rail and twice as sharp. He tried to marry her once before, but sent her back when she wouldn't stop asking questions. "Clara Henley," Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice cutting through the cold air like a knife. "You will come with us this instant." "No," Clara said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes went wide. No girl from her house had ever said no to her. Not once in 20 years. "I beg your pardon?" Mrs. Whitmore's voice could have frozen water. "I said no. I'm not going anywhere." Thomas Hartwell stepped forward, a nasty smile on his thin face. "Now, Clara, don't be difficult. We've come a long way to get you. I've decided to give you another chance. Not many men would be so kind after the trouble you caused." Emma made a small, scared sound. Clara squeezed her hand tighter. What trouble? Samuel asked, his voice calm but dangerous. Thomas laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. She didn't tell you? Your little helper here has quite a history. Threw a bowl of soup at my mother. Called my sister a fool. Refused to wear proper dresses. No wonder no one wants her. Clara felt her cheeks burn with shame. Those things were true, but there was more to the story. Much more. Is that so? Samuel looked at Clara with kind eyes. And why did you throw soup? Clara swallowed hard. She'd never told anyone the real reasons. Your mother said I was stupid because I couldn't read well. She laughed at me in front of everyone. And my sister? She told Emma's teacher that orphan children were dirty and shouldn't be in school with proper kids. Samuel nodded slowly. And the dresses? Clara's face burned hotter. They were too small. On purpose. Thomas said it would teach me to be grateful for anything I got. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Samuel's hands slowly curled into fists at his sides. Mrs. Whitmore snorted. Excuses and lies. This is exactly why she needs a firm hand. Thomas has graciously agreed to take her again, despite her past behavior. How gracious, Samuel said, his voice flat and cold. Thomas puffed up like a rooster. I'll be doing her a favor. No other man would want such a difficult girl. She should be grateful I'm willing to overlook her faults. What faults? Emma suddenly spoke up, her voice small but clear. Everyone turned to look at the little girl. She stepped out from behind Clara, her chin raised high. What faults does Clara have? Emma asked again, louder this time. Thomas blinked, not used to being questioned by children. Well, she's willful, and she speaks when she shouldn't, and she has ideas above her station. What's wrong with having ideas? Emma asked. Children should be seen and not heard, Mrs. Whitmore snapped. Emma's eyes flashed. Clara says smart children ask questions. She says questions help us learn. See? Thomas pointed at Emma like she was proof of something bad. She's already filling the child's head with nonsense. This is exactly why Clara needs proper guidance. Clara felt sick to her stomach. These people had followed her here to this safe place. They were talking about her like she was a broken horse that needed training. Worse, they were scaring Emma. I won't go, Clara said firmly. I have a home here. I have work. I'm needed. Mrs. Whitmore's face turned red. You are legally in my care until you turn 21 or marry. The law is on my side, girl. You will come with us, or I'll have the sheriff drag you back to town. The sheriff? Samuel's voice was quiet, but something in it made everyone stop talking. Yes, the sheriff, Mrs. Whitmore said, sounding less sure of herself. I have papers. Legal papers that say Clara belongs to my institution. Belongs? Samuel took a step forward. People don't belong to other people. Not in America. Not anymore. Thomas cleared his throat. Now see here, Mr. Morrison. I don't know what this girl has told you, but she's trouble. Always has been. I'm doing you a favor by taking her off your hands. Taking her where? Samuel asked. To my farm, of course, where she'll learn proper behavior. And if she doesn't learn? Thomas shrugged. There are ways to teach difficult women. My first wife was stubborn too at first. The look that crossed Samuel's face made Clara take a step back. She'd never seen anyone look so angry and so controlled at the same time. Your first wife, Samuel said slowly. What happened to her? Died in childbirth, Thomas said, like it didn't matter.
Weak constitution.
But Clara looked stronger. She should last longer. Emma gasped. Clara felt the world spinning around her. She'd heard whispers about Thomas Hartwell's first wife. Whispers that said she'd been covered in bruises when she died. Whispers that said she'd tried to run away 3 times. You will leave my property, Samuel said, his voice deadly quiet. Now. Mrs. Whitmore drew herself up to her full height. You have no authority here, Mr. Morrison. Clara is coming with us. The law says so. Does it? Samuel reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. Because I have a paper too. From Judge Patterson in town. It says Clara Henley is under my protection while we investigate claims of abuse in your institution. Clara's heart nearly stopped. When had Samuel gotten such a paper? How had he known to get it? Mrs. Whitmore snatched the paper from his hands, her eyes scanning it quickly. Her face went from red to white to red again. This is highly irregular, she sputtered. Judge Patterson didn't think so, Samuel said calmly. Especially after I told him about the conditions in your boarding house. The small food portions. The girls who disappear without word to their families. The men who pay extra for younger girls. Thomas stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. You can't prove any of that. Can't I? Samuel smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Funny thing about small towns, Mr. Hartwell. People talk. And when you start asking the right questions, you learn interesting things. Clara stared at Samuel in amazement. When had he been asking questions? When had he been investigating? You have no right, Mrs. Whitmore started. I have every right to protect the people in my household. Samuel cut her off. And Clara is part of my household now. For how long? Thomas sneered. Until you get tired of her questions? Until she causes too much trouble? Then what? You'll send her back. Just like everyone else. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. 'Cause Thomas was right, wasn't he? Everyone always sent her back eventually. Even Samuel would get tired of her someday. You're wrong, Emma said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her again. The little girl walked over to Clara and took her hand. Papa doesn't send people away, Emma said, looking straight at Thomas. When people are part of our family, they stay. Forever. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Emma squeezed her hand tighter. Clara is part of our family now, Emma continued. She makes breakfast every morning. She teaches me letters. She tells me stories when I have bad dreams. She's not going anywhere. Mrs. Whitmore made a frustrated noise. This is ridiculous. The girl is clearly disturbed by this situation. Clara will come with us, and that's final.
No.
The word came out stronger than Clara had ever heard herself speak. No, I won't go with you. I won't marry him. I won't pretend to be grateful for cruelty. You ungrateful little... Thomas started forward, his hand raised. He never finished the movement. Samuel stepped between them, and Thomas stumbled backward. I think you should leave, Samuel said quietly, before I forget my manners. Mrs. Whitmore and Thomas looked at each other. They looked at the legal paper in Mrs. Whitmore's hands. They looked at Samuel's calm, dangerous face. This isn't over, Mrs. Whitmore said finally. We'll be back with the real sheriff, with real authority. You do that, Samuel said. I'll be here. So will Clara. So will my witnesses. Witnesses? Thomas asked. Samuel nodded toward the road. Clara turned and gasped. 3 wagons were parked there, filled with people from town. Mr. Henderson from the general store. Mrs. Murphy from the church. The Olson family from the next farm over. All watching. All listening. News travels fast in small towns, Samuel said. People were curious about the visitors. Now they've heard quite a story. Mrs. Whitmore's face went pale. A room full of people had just heard Thomas Hartwell talk about teaching difficult women and lasting longer than his dead wife. They'd heard her talk about owning girls and legal papers. We'll be back, Mrs. Whitmore said. But her voice shook. I'm sure you will, Samuel replied. We'll be ready. The 2 visitors climbed back into their wagon. Thomas shot one last angry look at Clara, but she didn't flinch. She stood straight and tall, Emma's hand in hers, Samuel beside her. As the black wagon rolled away, Clara felt something change inside her chest. She wasn't the same scared girl who had been returned 3 times. She wasn't alone anymore. She had people who would fight for her. But as the wagon disappeared down the road, she knew this wasn't over. Mrs. Whitmore and Thomas Hartwell would be back. And next time they might bring more than just angry words. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning. They'll be back tomorrow. Samuel's words hung in the quiet kitchen like smoke from a dying fire. Clara sat at the wooden table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had grown cold while she stared at nothing. Emma had finally fallen asleep after an hour of tears and questions Clara couldn't answer. "I know," Clara whispered, "and next time they'll bring the sheriff. Judge Patterson's order won't hold forever," Samuel continued, his voice heavy with worry. "It was meant to buy us time, not solve the problem." Clara looked up at him then, really looked. His hair was messy from where he'd run his hands through it. His shirt was wrinkled. Lines of worry creased his face. She'd done this to him, brought trouble to his peaceful home. "I should go," she said quietly, "before they come back, before they make things worse for you and Emma." "Go where?" Samuel asked, sitting down across from her. "It's December, Clara. There's snow on the ground. Where would you go?" She had no answer. There was nowhere. No one who would take in a girl with no money and no family. No one who would stand up to Mrs. Whitmore's legal papers. "I could try the next town over," she said, but even she didn't believe it. "And when Mrs. Whitmore follows you there, when she brings the law with her, what then?" Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back. Crying wouldn't fix anything. Samuel reached across the table and covered her cold hands with his warm ones. "There is another way." Something in his voice made her look up. His gray eyes were serious, determined. The same look he'd worn when he faced down Mrs. Whitmore and Thomas Hartwell. "What way?" she asked. Samuel took a deep breath, like a man about to jump off a cliff. "Marry me." The words hit Clara like a bucket of cold water. She stared at him, sure she'd heard wrong. "What?" "Marry me," Samuel said again, his voice stronger now. "Mrs. Whitmore has no claim on a married woman. The law would be on our side then." Clara pulled her hands away from his, her heart beating fast. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. But you don't love me. I don't love you. We barely know each other." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "I know you get up before dawn to start the fire so the house is warm when Emma wakes up. I know you saved every scrap of bread for a week to feed the stray dog that showed up at our door. I know you cry sometimes at night when you think no one can hear." Clara's cheeks burned. She hadn't known he'd noticed any of those things. "I know you're brave," Samuel continued. "Braver than anyone should have to be. I know you're kind, even after the world hasn't been kind to you. I know Emma hasn't had nightmares since you started telling her bedtime stories." "That's not the same as love," Clara whispered. "No," Samuel agreed. "It's not, but it's something real. It's something we could build on." Clara stood up quickly, the chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the window and stared out at the snow-covered yard. The moon was full, turning everything silver and strange. "You feel sorry for me," she said. "That's what this is. Pity." She heard Samuel's chair scrape as he stood up too. His footsteps crossed the kitchen floor, stopping just behind her. "You think I'd marry someone out of pity?" he asked quietly. "Why else?" Chicken was stuck halfway up the apple tree, and it was definitely Clara's fault. Emma pointed and giggled from her spot on the porch steps. "Mama Clara, I told you chickens can't fly very well. I was just trying to get her away from my vegetable garden," Clara called back, hands on her hips, staring up at the red hen who glared down at her like an angry queen. "How was I supposed to know she'd panic and flutter up there?" Samuel emerged from the barn, took one look at the situation, and started laughing so hard he had to lean against the fence post. "Don't you dare laugh at me, Samuel Morrison." But Clara was fighting a smile herself. 3 months of marriage had taught her that some disasters were actually adventures in disguise. It was April now, and the world had come alive again. Green shoots pushed through brown earth. Apple trees wore crowns of white flowers. The air smelled like growing things and possibilities. Clara had survived her first winter as a married woman, and spring felt like a reward for making it through. "I'll get the ladder," Samuel said, still chuckling. "No need." Clara gathered her skirts and grabbed the lowest branch. "I got her up there. I'll get her down." "Clara, be careful." But she was already climbing, her farm-strong arms pulling her up branch by branch. The chickens squawked and fluttered higher. "Now look what you've done," Clara muttered, reaching for another branch. "We're both going to be stuck up here." The view from the top of the apple tree was amazing. She could see the whole valley spread out below, green fields, silver streams, houses scattered like toys. In the distance, a train puffed along the tracks, carrying people to places she'd never been and no longer wanted to go. "Clara Morrison," she said to herself, testing how the name sounded up in the sky. "Wife, mother, tree climber. What are you doing up there?" called a voice from below. Clara looked down to see a woman she didn't recognize standing in their yard. She was young, maybe Clara's age, with dark hair and a fancy dress that looked out of place on a farm. A man in a black suit stood beside her, holding the reins of 2 fine horses hitched to a shiny buggy. "Getting a chicken?" Clara called back, as if that explained everything. Samuel stepped forward. "Can I help you folks?" The woman looked up at Clara with curious eyes. "I'm looking for Clara Henley. I heard she lives here now." Clara's heart stopped. Nobody called her Clara Henley anymore. Only people from her old life knew that name. "There's no Clara Henley here," Samuel said carefully. "Wait!" Clara scrambled down the tree faster than she'd climbed up, the chicken forgotten. She jumped the last few feet and landed hard, her skirts tangled around her legs. "I'm Clara Morrison now, but I used to be Clara Henley." The woman smiled, and Clara's world tilted sideways. "Rose?" she whispered. Her sister Rose, 2 years older, who'd been placed 3 years ago to a family in Chicago. Rose, who Clara thought she'd never see again. "Hello, little sister." They ran toward each other and collided in a hug that nearly knocked them both down. Clara breathed in the scent of expensive soap and perfume, so different from the simple lavender water she used now. "How did you find me?" Clara asked, holding tight. "It took months of detective work. I hired investigators to track down all my sisters. You're the first one I found." Emma crept closer, shy but curious. "Mama Clara, who is this lady?" "This is my sister Rose." "Rose, this is Emma, my daughter." Rose's eyebrows went up. "Your daughter? Clara, you're full of surprises." Samuel joined them, his face cautious but polite. "I'm Samuel Morrison, Clara's husband." The man in the black suit stepped forward. "I'm Detective James Wright. Mrs. Patterson hired me to locate her family members." "Patterson?" Clara looked at Rose in confusion. "I married William Patterson 6 months after I left the boarding house. He owns 3 hotels in Chicago." Rose's smile was proud but tired. "I'm rich now, Clara. Really rich. And I want to help you." Something cold settled in Clara's stomach. "Help me how? You don't have to live like this anymore." Rose gestured at the farmhouse, the yard, the simple life Clara had built. "You can come to Chicago with me. I'll pay for your education, buy you beautiful clothes, introduce you to society. You could marry someone important, have servants, live in a mansion." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire nobody wanted. "I am married," Clara said slowly, "to Samuel." "Oh, honey." Rose's voice was gentle but pitying. "This isn't a real marriage. This is survival. I know because I've been there. You don't have to pretend with me." Samuel's face went still and hard. Emma grabbed Clara's hand, sensing danger. "It's real to me," Clara said quietly. "But think about what you could have. Money, education, respect. You could travel the world, see Paris, London, New York. You could be somebody important." Clara looked around at her life. The farmhouse with its squeaky front step and rose bushes by the door. The vegetable garden she'd planted with her own hands. The apple tree where a chicken still sat, probably wondering what all the fuss was about. Samuel, strong and kind, who'd given her his name when she had nothing to offer in return. Emma, bright and brave, who called her mama and meant it. I am somebody important, she said. I'm a wife and mother and friend. I grow things and fix things and make people laugh. I can climb trees and catch chickens and read bedtime stories. What's more important than that? Rose frowned. Clara, you're not thinking clearly. You've been isolated here, away from civilization. You don't know what you're missing. Maybe you don't know what you're missing. The words came out sharper than Clara intended. Rose stepped back, hurt flickering across her face. I'm sorry, Clara said quickly. I didn't mean to sound harsh. I'm happy that you found success, Rose, truly. But this is my success. This is my happiness. Living on a farm, doing manual labor, having no money, no status, no future. Having a family who loves me for who I am, not what I can do for them. Detective Wright cleared his throat. Perhaps we should leave you folks to discuss this privately. Mrs. Patterson, we have rooms at the hotel in town. Yes, Rose said, still staring at Clara with confused eyes. Yes, that's a good idea. Clara, think about what I've said. I'll come back tomorrow, and we can talk more. After they left, the yard felt too quiet. Emma had disappeared into the house. Samuel stood by the fence, looking out at the fields. You could go with her, he said finally. Clara's heart clenched. Is that what you want? I want you to be happy. If she can give you things I can't. Samuel Morrison, look at me. He turned, and she saw fear in his eyes. The same fear she'd felt when Mrs. Whitmore came with Thomas Hartwell, trying to drag her back to a life that wasn't really living. Do you remember what you told me when we first met? About Emma needing to see that it's possible to survive losing everything and still find reasons to keep going. He nodded. Well, I survived. And I found my reasons. They're right here in this yard, in this house, in this life we've built together. Rose can offer me the world, but I already have everything I want. That evening, Clara found Emma sitting by her bedroom window, unusually quiet. What are you thinking about, little bird? Are you going to leave with the fancy lady? Clara sat down beside her daughter and pulled her close. What do you think? I think she doesn't understand about families. She thinks money and big houses make people happy. But I was sad even when Mama was alive and we had everything we needed. And I'm happy now even though we don't have very much money. Why do you think that is? Emma considered this seriously. Because being happy isn't about having things. It's about having people who love you and doing things that make you feel good inside. Clara kissed the top of Emma's head. You're pretty smart for an 8-year-old. I get it from you and Papa. That night, Clara lay awake thinking about roads not taken. What if she had gone to Chicago 3 years ago? What if she'd married Thomas Hartwell? What if she'd never met Samuel and Emma? She might have been richer. She might have worn silk dresses and lived in a mansion and had servants to do her cooking and cleaning. But would she have been happier? The next morning, Rose returned with a trunk full of gifts. Silk scarves, pearl earrings, books, even a music box that played a tiny waltz when you opened the lid. These are just samples, Rose said, spreading the treasures across Clara's kitchen table. Think of what you could have if you came with me. Emma picked up the music box with careful hands, her eyes wide with wonder. The melody was beautiful, delicate as butterfly wings. It's lovely, Clara said honestly. All of it. You're generous to think of us. Then you'll come? No. Rose's face fell. But why? What does this place have that Chicago doesn't? Clara looked around her simple kitchen. Sunlight streamed through windows she'd washed herself. Bread she'd baked that morning cooled on the counter. Emma's drawings covered one-wall pictures of their family, the farm, the animals. A vase of wildflowers sat on the table, picked by small hands that morning. It has us, she said simply. All of us, together, making a life that belongs to us. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Rose packed up her gifts, all except the music box, which she left for Emma. At the door, she turned back. If you ever change your mind, I won't. But Rose, I hope you find what you're looking for. Real happiness, not just the appearance of it. Rose's eyes filled with tears. I thought money would make everything better. Does it? Sometimes. But sometimes I wake up in my big house with my fancy things, and I feel empty inside. Like I'm still that scared girl at the boarding house, just wearing different clothes. Clara hugged her sister one more time. You don't have to stay scared forever. You can choose to be happy, wherever you are. After Rose left, Clara found Samuel in the barn, brushing his horse with more attention than the animal probably needed. Everything all right? She asked. I was thinking about what your sister said, about me not being able to give you the things you deserve. Clara took the brush from his hands and set it aside. Samuel Morrison, do you love me? Yes. Do you respect me? Yes. Do you listen when I talk and value my opinions? Always. Do you make me laugh and comfort me when I'm sad and stand beside me when I'm facing trouble? I try to. Then you give me everything I deserve, everything I need, everything I want. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. Right there in the barn with hay in her hair and dirt on her hands and the scent of horses all around them. It wasn't romantic like in storybooks, but it was real and warm and theirs. That afternoon, Clara started a letter to Rose. It took her 3 tries to get the words right, writing slowly in her careful handwriting that was getting better every day. Dear sister, she began, thank you for thinking of me and wanting to help, but I am already helped. I am already saved. I am already exactly where I belong. I hope someday you will be too. Love, Clara Morrison. She sealed the letter and walked to town to mail it herself. On the way back, she stopped at the cemetery where Samuel's first wife was buried. She'd never visited before, feeling like she was intruding on private grief. The gravestone was simple. Margaret Morrison, beloved wife and mother. Someone had left fresh flowers, Samuel probably, or maybe Emma. Hello, Margaret, Clara said quietly. I'm Clara. I'm taking care of your family now. The wind stirred the grass around the grave, and Clara chose to take it as a welcome. I want you to know they're happy. Emma is talking again, full of questions and laughter. Samuel smiles more than he probably has in months. We're not trying to replace you. We're just continuing, building something new on the foundation you left. She stayed a few more minutes, then walked home as the sun set behind the mountains. Samuel was teaching Emma to milk the cow, their heads bent together in concentration. They looked up when she approached, their faces bright with welcome. How did it go in town? Samuel asked. Good. I mailed a letter to Rose and bought supplies for tomorrow's baking. Mrs. Jenkins wants 6 loaves of my brown bread for the church social. People are talking about your bread all over the county, Emma said proudly. They say it's the best anyone's ever tasted. Clara felt a warm glow of pride. 6 months ago, she was nobody special. Now she was known for something she'd created with her own hands. That night, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness, Clara realized she'd stopped looking toward the horizon and wondering what lay beyond it. The horizon was still there, still full of possibilities, but she no longer felt the need to chase after them. She had found her place in the world, and it was right here in this moment, with these people who'd chosen to love her and whom she'd chosen to love in return. I have an idea, she said suddenly. What's that? Samuel asked. Let's plant a garden next spring. A big one, with flowers and vegetables and maybe some fruit trees. We'll make this place so beautiful that people will come from miles around just to see it. I like that idea, Emma said sleepily. Me too, Samuel agreed, taking Clara's hand in his. And in the distance, a train whistle echoed across the valley, carrying strangers toward unknown destinations. But Clara no longer wondered where it might take her. She was already home,